But it wasn't Greenspan's economic skill that got him to the top banker job. Instead, it was his skill as a politician. During Ronald Reagan's first and second terms, while the irritatingly independent Paul Volcker sat on the Fed throne, Greenspan was quietly working the refs, attending as many White House functions as he could. Former Reagan aides told Greenspan's biographer, Jerome Tuchili, that Allen made a point of regularly massaging the people who mattered. Another official, Martin Anderson, reported that, "I don't think I was in the White House once where I didn't see him sitting in the lobby or working the offices. I was absolutely astounded by his omnipresence." Greenspan had proved his worth to Reagan by using a commission he headed to perform one of the all-time budgetary magic tricks, an invisible tax hike that helped the supposedly anti-tax Reagan administration fund 8 years of massive deficit spending. In 1981, Reagan appointed Greenspan to head the National Commission on Social Security Reform, which had been created to deal with an alleged short-term funding crisis that would leave the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund bankrupt by 1983. It goes without saying that any political decision one makes with regard to Social Security is hazardous. Cutting benefits is a shortcut to electoral death, and the alternative, raising taxes, isn't so palatable either. Greenspan's solution was to recommend hikes in the Social Security tax, which of course is not considered a real tax. Reagan would hilariously later describe such hikes as revenue enhancements, because the taxpayer theoretically gets that money back later on in benefits. The thinking here was that in the early 80s, with so many baby boomers now in their prime earning years, the Reagan administration would hike payments to build up a surplus that could, in 20 or 30 years, be used to pay out benefits when those same baby boomers reached retirement age. The administration accepted those proposals, and the Social Security tax rate went from 9.35% in 1981 to 15.3% by 1990. Two things about this. One, Social Security taxes are very regressive, among other things because they only apply to wage income. If you're a hedge fund manager or a Wall Street investor and you make all your money in carried interest or capital gains, you don't pay. And they are also capped, at this writing, at around $106,000. Meaning that wages above a certain level are not taxed at all. That means that a married couple earning $100,000 total will pay roughly the same amount of Social Security taxes that Lloyd Blankfein or Bill Gates will, if not more, depending on how the latter two structure their compensation. So if you ignore the notion that Social Security taxes come back as benefits later on, and just think of them as revenue source for the government, it's a way for the state to take money from working and middle-class taxpayers at a highly disproportional rate. Second, Greenspan's plan to build up a sort of Social Security war chest for use in paying out benefits to retirees 20 years down the road was based on a fallacy. When you pay money into Social Security, it doesn't go into a locked box that is separate from the rest of the budget and can't be used for other government spending. After the Greenspan reforms, the Social Security Administration bought T-bills with that money, essentially lending the cash back to the government for use in other appropriations. So, if, let's say, your president wanted an extra few $1 billion or so of short-term spending money, he could just reach into the budget and take all that Social Security money, leaving whoever would be president 2 decades later holding not cash to pay out Social Security benefits, but government notes or bonds, i.e., IOUs. And that's exactly what happened. The recommendations ushered in after Greenspan's commission effectively resulted in $1.69 trillion in new, regressive taxes over the next 20 years or so. But instead of keeping their hands off that money and preserving it for Social Security payments, Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, and Bush 2 spent it, all of it, inspiring the so-called Social Security crisis of George W. Bush's presidency, in which it was announced suddenly that Social Security, far from having a surplus, was actually steaming toward bankruptcy.